So what today's presentation is going to give an overview about AWS security services. And if you like at this point also, if you have any question or you want me, I have an agenda to show you what all AWS security services uh, is and what is that, how many different services are there, how you can protect your cloud environment using that. And also I would do a deep dive in one of the service called Web Application Firewall, or WAF, and I would do a demo of that. But before I begin, any one of you have anything for me to cover or just keep in my mind while I'm presenting this?
Well, the one issue that I've encountered with WAF is trying to work WAF with CloudFront and a load balancer. Sometimes we have redirect issues in there with having all those various endpoints set up in the chain.
Okay, so what I would do is when I'm doing a demo, I have set up a CloudFront endpoint. For any troubleshooting, like if you can contact me separately, but I would try to show you where you configure that. And if any specific thing, we can take it offline, but I'm glad to show you the configuration. Anything else? Okay. So AWS security services, right? Today, everyone, all major enterprises are using cloud or hybrid cloud. And it is very important that you secure your payload, you secure your network, you secure your databases, and if you are HIPAA compliant, or if you have PCI compliance or SOX compliance, you store PII data, you don't want to be caught by the law and trip over it. So you want to ensure that your services which you are hosting on cloud, and today we'll talk about AWS services here, is completely secured, and how AWS provides those security. So I'm going to start with all the basic steps and then go to some of the high-level services. So first thing is, if you guys have tried, and I understand in this audience, maybe there may be people who are new to AWS, but if you have tried any time, you would have always tried IAM. So IAM is one of the first steps for security. It is identity and access management, and you basically protect by providing secured login, secured user identities, and also IAM can secure your services. So moving on, this is one of the best practice slide. Before I'm going to show you some other slides. When you start with IAM, you basically have a root account, and one of the best practices to not use root account. You can create an admin user and use that to log into services, and you create other users and give them the access which you only what they want. So minimum privileges, restricted access.
In progress.
Sorry.
I muted him. You're good.
Okay, so point is, like, if you don't want to use root access, it is having unrestricted access to your account. Even the access key and secret key, you can delete those if you have. You can create them when you need it. Most of the work you can do it as an admin. Only in few cases you would need root access. So AWS highly recommends that you don't use root user to log in. Also, when you configure users, you can do multi-factor authentication, MFA, with IAM. Let me move to the next slide. So how do you create, when you want to create access, basically it's always good to create groups, which is equivalent to roles. And let's say in your organization at high level, you want to create admins, developers, test. And under this account, these 3 roles you created. Now under those, each one you want to give different access to different groups. So by that you can set up permissions for each role, and then you can have a user under that group. By doing that, a user will inherit whatever permissions are provided for that role. So as I said, one is a user role, second is service roles. So service role is like, for example, the EC2 is one of the basic service, where you spin a server, a Linux machine or a Windows server, and now you want to access S3 from your EC2. And how do you do that? Like, you can have your application running on EC2, but to access S3, AWS recommends that you use IAM role and you manage the permission. When you go to the IAM console, you can define the policies. There are AWS provided managed policies, which you can choose, or you can build your custom policy. But the idea is to give only access to even to your services, whatever they need, not more, not less. So let's take the example of this dev role. We saw dev role. You have a development environment, development role created for your users, for your dev team. And the check marks are where what access is provided, cross is what is not provided. So here you can see access is provided to some of the service, some of the functionality within EC2, some access to RDS, some to S3. So you can define granular level access for your developer team. And there are 2 security tools which you can leverage as an admin. You can generate an IAM credential report at account level, which shows you all your account users, and you can check their status. So you can keep track of all the accounts. Over time, some of the accounts are not being used, so you want to delete them and you don't know, you can run this credential report. Second thing is IAM Access Advisor, which is very useful. It shows the service permissions granted to a user and when it was used last. So if somebody is not using certain service, you can take away that access if they don't need it. So you can revise your policies for that user or for that particular role. Having said that, I'm going to move to more advanced security controls. I would just like to take a pause and see if anyone has any question on the basic IAM functionalities. Okay, that looks like no. Okay, so AWS, when you have multiple accounts to manage, for example, you might have a dev account, production environment account, a QA account separately, or if you are a large enterprise, you can have multiple accounts based on groups, based on portfolios, based on projects, depending on your project size. So how do you manage the security across so many accounts? So AWS offers landing zone, which creates control tower. Control tower is deployed with a management account. So you create a management account, and it requires minimum 2 more accounts. One is a log archive account, which can consolidate all the logs, help you consolidate all the logs across the accounts. Second is audit account, where if your auditors or external auditors want to audit the system, you can give them access to go through all the different logs and different controls, security controls. So audit account is useful for that. And the other accounts are your workload account, which in this diagram is shown as provisioned accounts. And you can create your account baseline, you can create your network baseline, you can provision the services through control tower. So if you see here, this is customer OU, you can have pro OU, now you can have dev OU. So what is OU? So control tower works with a principle of organizations. And organization can have a group of accounts. So you roll out your guardrail controls uh, for the accounts, and these accounts will roll under the organization. So you can enforce policies and security using these organizations. You can give them access to the accounts. Uh, another thing is important is that you can give access to users using excuse me, AWS single sign-on, and it can integrate with AWS SSO directory. So all your users password configuration, it can be handled through AWS SSO directory, but you can also integrate that with Azure AD, or let's say Okta if your enterprise is using Okta, or any other SAML-based authentication tool. You can integrate that with single sign-on. So you put controls in such a way that it gives you, you can monitor all the accounts, monitor the usage. And there is something called guardrails where you define the rules, which is, excuse me, which will have mandatory rules, strongly recommended rules, and elective rules. So if you enable those, you can see non-compliance and you can take a corrective action. And once it is corrective action is taken, that non-compliance will be switched off and it won't be appearing anymore. So you can, for security point of view, you can do a lot of governance activities through control tower, through guardrail, and putting all these controls in place. So there were many services in the previous slide also, but some of the key security monitoring services are here. AWS Shield gives you protection against DDoS attack. DDoS attack is very common nowadays, and you can see all these services, EC2, load balancer, CloudFront, Route 53 is protected using Shield. WAF is mainly used for your web application, and you can protect your web application by putting WAF before it hits your web application services. And then you also have firewall manager. Firewall managers help you to configure the firewall centrally and roll out the policies and rules for the firewall, for WAF, from a central place. Guard duty is one of which helps you do threat intelligence. It detects a threat on your servers, on your accounts, and it tells you that there is some non-compliance and you have to take action. And you can block the host, or you can come up with your action plan based on what anomaly detection comes up with. It's a machine learning which is used behind the scene in guard duty. Amazon Inspector is more of a vulnerability management. A vulnerability is something related to the OS or the ports or the network, and you want to ensure that your systems are protected from virus, from any OS upgrade. Is not if you have anything which is not to the level where it is safe, you have to upgrade your OS. So inspector can go through this and tells you what all are your vulnerability in the system. MESI is for, I was talking about HIPAA, PII, PCI. You also have standards like GDPR in Europe. So it protects your data. It discovers, it classifies, and it lets you know if your data is compromised, and also you can take a corrective action then. So it secures your content. So these all different security monitoring tools have different roles here. Depending on your priority, you would enforce or use some of the services. Now, Security Hub is a common hub where you can monitor all these different services. It sends, it creates notification at a center place, and you can receive a notification. So it will help you get the compliance and a single pane of window to monitor all your security services. And here what you can see, this is one example that with Security Hub, you can also integrate a third-party security solution. And when there is any anomaly detected, Security Hub can send log to CloudWatch, which can generate a notification through SNS. It can be integrated to Slack, or you can create a ticket or generate an email. So you can almost do anything. You can have a Lambda function to do take any further action as you need. So that is, this slide is more about the checkpoint on what we discussed. But before I move to network security, any question on these services? Okay. I guess that's a no. And now I'm moving to network security in AWS. Now I would start with the basic stuff. So if you build your servers, you know the concept of VPC, you know what is public subnet, what is private subnet. So I'm just going to cover this in case somebody is not aware about it. So VPC is a virtual private cloud network, and within that you can create public subnet or private subnet. And public subnet is normally connected with the internet gateway through a routing table. And so what that means is whatever has a public IP from in the public subnet, the external world can access it depending on certain security which you allow them to. But how, suppose you have EC2 instance running in private subnet, how would you, and it requires you want to download a software, and for that it has to go to internet. Now it doesn't have any access to internet because this is protected under a private subnet. To do that, what you do is in your public subnet, you create a NAT gateway. The NAT gateway, you can connect from your public subnet to private subnet. So from private subnet, the request will be routed to NAT gateway, and NAT gateway will have a connection to internet gateway. And that's how you would be able to download or go to internet through the private subnet. So these are the additional security controls in place for private subnet. And another point is you can define, I believe there is a slide for it. Yes. So you can define subnet level security through NACL or network access control list. So what you do is you define your rules here in this control list, what you want to allow and what you want to deny. Now this is a stateless service. So also the outbound traffic, you want to mention what you allow and what you don't want to allow. So NACL will be there at each subnet level. Your NACL at public subnet will have more easy route for the internet access, but your NACL at the private subnet, you will block the internet traffic or other IPs or ports. So NACL works on a principle of rules, and each rule has a priority. So you have to make sure how you want to evaluate your rules, because rules can be allow and deny. You want to allow whatever you want to allow, you want to mention it first, and deny we can follow. So whatever doesn't fall under allow can be denied. So this is another firewall at the subnet level. Similarly, you have a firewall at the instance level, which we call it as security groups. Now these are stateful, meaning you define that inbound traffic, and it can send the response back to the calling service or the caller. So here, suppose, let's say through internet gateway, you are allowing traffic to application elastic load balancer through 443. Now, since you are already now within the VPC, you connect your security group of EC2 instance, which is your web tier, to the ELB through port 80. And when your web tier wants to connect to your database tier, you can allow traffic through port 3306. So if you see here, ALB cannot directly access the DB, and let me make it a little bit smaller. Cannot access directly the DB, and only what you allow that is possible to access. Otherwise, it cannot access. So it is at instance level. You have to make sure whatever wants to be communicating with each other, you define those security group rules. Now I'm going to talk briefly about firewall manager. We saw the mention of that. So what does firewall manager does is it's a security management service, and it centrally configures and manages your firewall policies across your accounts and application in your organization managed by AWS organization. So even your VPC rule, subnets, your firewall, WAF, you can manage it through a central place called AWS Firewall Manager. So what does Firewall Manager can manage? WAF, Shield, VPC security groups, network firewall, or Route 53 resolver, DNS firewall, and it sends notification to your security hub to monitor all the security related incidents. So what does it do at a glance? It defines the rules. You have to define the scope of this rule, and based on certain rule, when it triggers, you allow or deny the traffic. So you monitor and you take an action. To have firewall manager, you need to have minimum AWS organization and AWS config. AWS config audits all your configuration, your services, and lets you know if something is violating your guardrails or something is non-compliant. So it is required for all accounts if you are enabling firewall manager. So this is a typical scenario of how firewall manager controls this. So if you see AWS organization and config are minimum required for firewall manager, you create rules and you roll out these rules as policies to your web ACLs for WAF, for your ALB, for your load balancer or API gateway, and for the WAF. And you can also manage the rules for your firewall manager, AWS firewall. And that's how you protect all this database and underlying application. And we would look more into AWS WAF rules, as I will cover that in the demo. So what's a network firewall? Network firewall will protect your cloud environment. It scales automatically. It is you can centrally manage all your policies, and it's highly flexible rule engine. And along with firewall manager, you can centrally monitor it. But network firewall is a firewall which will handle these things. So now let's move on to the web application firewall deep dive. So why AWS WAF? So as you know, most of the attacks come from to your website through internet, and there could be a lot of malicious traffic. People can try to do SQL injection, cross-server scripting, AWS. So you can enable all these conditions by defining rules. AWS Marketplace already provides you manage rules. You can filter your traffic based on red-based rules, IP match, GeoIP, regex, and the size constraint of your payload. And you can get visibility in CloudWatch from WAF. You can look at the logs, and you can also debug those logs. So where WAF is applicable, where WAF, one of the gentlemen was asking how WAF configuration is done. So WAF works at protects. WAF endpoints are connected to one of these, either CloudFront. So you have CloudFront distribution, and then you can directly connect to load balancer, or you have microservice architecture and you are exposing your architecture through API gateway. So there also WAF will provide you the protection. So how this thing work? You define, so these are different conditions. These conditions, you define the rules with the condition, and then you take an action. And you have three type of action: accept, deny, or count. You allow it, or you deny it, or you count the number of requests coming, and what is the payload count. You can also monitor that. With that, any question before I move to the demo? Okay. So after the demo will be a quick demo, but after the demo, I will also, if time permits, I will also walk you through some WAF architecture for automation, how you can automate this network issues with WAF. So if time permits, we'll look at that. So let me now share the WAF screen. So so this is my AWS WAF and Shield service. Whenever you need to go to a service, you just type that service here. Sorry, that's not the service. That's so you just say WAF and it brings you here. Now I think I need to refresh. And this console will show you the latest services which you recently visited. And this is the WAF menu here, pretty simple. You define, basically you create web SELs. So this is one of the SEL which I had created for API gateway. However, the demo which I'm going to show you is, this is a juice website for ordering juice or smoothies, and whatever attack can happen on this, how WAF protects that. So since it's a CloudFront deployment, I have to go to the CloudFront by changing this region to global. And I've already created this WAF ACL here. So going to the first question, how do you configure the endpoint? So here my CloudFront distribution is attached to the load balancer. So I am attaching, associating CloudFront distribution here. So here you can choose what kind of resource you want to associate, and then you can find the resource here and you can add it. So right now I've added this CloudFront distribution. If you want to add application load balancer or API gateway, you can do it through here. So WebACL can do protect your multiple resources. And going to the overview, if you see here, this is the traffic flowing. It gives you a small dashboard, and you can see how many requests came, whether those were allowed or whether those were denied based on any rules which were triggered. And these are all the rules which are configured right now. So we would see how the rules are configured. So you go to the rule, and here you will see a priority for the rules. So based on that priority, the rules will be evaluated. And if you want to add a rule, you go here and say add manage rule groups. So Managed rule groups are something which is provided by AWS or provided by AWS partners. So if I click this one, you can see these are the rules, and I applied core rule set. Just by toggling this one, you can apply that. The second is I have done SQL injection attack protection through this particular SQL database rules. But if you want, let's say a partner firewall from F5 or Fortinet or Imperva, let's say you like Fortinet and it gives you a rule OWASP top 10 complete rule set, you can subscribe this in AWS Marketplace. And the capacity, what is mentioned here is how much capacity is available to you. Now, the default is 1,500. If you want more than that, then you have to make a request. So we'll see some of the rules. We saw the AWS manage rules, but let's see this particular rule where I'm blocking based on, so you can block the traffic based on the header, query parameter, or various. So let's say, let me show you, I'm going to add a rule and it will show you rule builder. So you can define an IP set if you want to block it. So you can, if there is a fixed IP you want to block or allow, you can define it here, or you can build a rule here. So this is a rule visual editor and this is a rule JSON editor. So by default, there is no rule right now, but this is a basic JSON. So once you define the rule here, you put some name, let's say one. And you want to inspect either header or cookies or URI path or string, query string or body. So these are all the options from the payload, what you want to inspect and where you want to apply that rule. So let's say you select header, and then you can select what you want to compare, what if all headers, if it matches certain string, it exactly matches a string or starts with a string or ends with a string. And if you want to do a transformation, now you just say whether you want to count, allow, or block, and then add a rule. So now we'll see one of the rule which is already configured. And to show you, it's very easy to show you in a JSON. So this rule is when the header includes X tomato attack, if it's a match, it will deny the traffic with response code 408. And I've created a response, which is, I mentioned it as a test. So it would print that response. And this is what it is. Sorry, you can't access the juice machine. So we'll test this one. And before I move forward, I would show you one more rule, which is a complex rule. So okay. So this is a complex rule, and that's why it says you can't switch to the visual editor, but you can use statements like and, operators like and, or, and you can write a complex rule using JSON. So just wanted to show you that. I will test this rule as well. So I'm going to move to my terminal, and let me move my. So this is a variable I have set up, and this variable is addressed to the website. So let's see what this website is. I mean, we have seen the website, but whether it is the same website. So if you see, it gives you the header, but if you want to see the web page in the call, then I'm going to take it from here. Okay. So this is the same web page, which is running certain script. Now, let me move this to this. And now I'm going to create a cross-site scripting attack. So this URL, this curl command will create a cross-site scripting attack, and it would be blocked because we have selected that as a manage rule. So you see get 403. If you remember, we also have selected the SQL injection. So I'm going to just run curl command to introduce SQL injection to this website. Again, it is blocked, 403. And if you remember, we had one rule called custom rule called tomato attack in the header. And with that, it will block it and it will give you a message, a custom message, which I have configured. And last one, I would like to show you a couple more from the complex rule which we have set up. So if the header is having chocolate and topping as nuts, this we don't want to allow. We notice that this is an attack. So it's going to again throw an error and request will be blocked. And one more curl will show you query parameter providing certain values which you don't, which is a malicious attack. So with this milkshake query parameter, second. Let me move my screen a little bit. It's again going to be blocked, 403. So this is it shows you how powerful WAF is and how simple it is to configure. So going back here, any questions so far? I think everyone is quiet. No questions? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Yes.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to show then in meantime, we have around 12 more minutes. Taking the benefit of time, I'm going to show how you can automate WAF to create incidents or notify you or take action from the logs. So this one is one architecture where you have WAF. It's protecting your CloudWatch distribution. Whenever there is a rule triggered, we can have SNS topic, which can be subscribed through Lambda, and it can process or it can read the logs from your WAF, get those details, and with those details, it can send you an email. And this could be your support team. Or security team, he would receive an email that there was a certain malicious attack, and so he doesn't have to keep on monitoring it. When he receives email, he can look into the log and take an action. Because many attacks happen where you have not configured a custom rule. The hackers try to find out different ways to attack your website. So this kind of incident reporting will help you discover those without losing time. The next one is guard duty. Guard duty is another tool, security tool for threat prevention. It provides protection against any malicious attack as well, in terms of any suspicious activity. It would be detected. It would be generated as an event, and from that event, a Lambda can be triggered, and a WAF rule can be triggered as well. And you can store the state data for in a DB. Here we are using DynamoDB, a NoSQL database, for checking blocked host. So you can automate WAF to automatically block suspicious host by the result of guard duty. Guard duty will tell you that this host is sending you malicious traffic, and that event is captured. And now you want to automatically block that, and you can do that by creating a rule or updating a rule based on the findings by running that command through Lambda on WAF. So you can even take, without any manual intervention, you can take an action for a new attack, new type of attack. And the last one is more about how you manage the logs and how you feed back to WAF. So here there are two routes shown. One is directly reading the WAF logs, and from WAF log, basically WAF logs are read by Kinesis data firehose, which is very effective in processing real-time data. And this data then is stored into S3, web ACL traffic information. And S3 is a storage, block storage by Amazon. And then we also have a tool called Athena, which runs query. I can also create reports from here. I can have my business intelligence tool called QuickSight run those query and produce me the graph if I want to monitor the graphs and certain parameters. But Lambda retrieves these logs, and it can also update the WAF. Similarly, in the second route, you are protecting this CloudFront. So there was a question how CloudFront and load balancers are connected. So you have to create a CloudFront distribution on load balancer, and ultimately it will protect your traffic going to your EC2 instances. For example, your load balancers are managing your EC2 instance or any other services or containers. It can then WAF can protect that. And even if you have Amazon API gateway, you can read those logs and you can create a WAF rule or update take action from that Lambda. So you can do a lot of security automation. These are the various things WAF protects: whitelist, blacklist, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, HTTP flood, IP list, bots, etc. So, I mean, I know this is very quick, but it's not difficult to implement these services. A lot of, for example, these all services are serverless. So you don't have to even have to build a server. So if you want to try in your AWS account, play with it, create a CloudWatch distribution, create an alarm, create an SNS topic, write a Lambda function. You can get a lot of Lambda code on the on web or AWS literature as well, and you can generate an email. So if you are a security person in your organization, you can use this type of architectures to automate your incidents or take action. So with 10 minutes remaining, I would take any question which you may have.
Yeah, this is David Rutherford with HT3. Question about, kind of alludes to my original question, with a CloudFront in front of a load balancer setup. Best practice, obviously we have a WAF in front of the CloudFront. What
Yes.
about between CloudFront and the load balancer? because obviously the load balancer is still technically on the web, even if it doesn't have a DNS entry pointing to it. Do you have any advice on what to configure there firewall wise?
So that's a good question. Basically, you are distributing your traffic through CloudFront.
Right.
I can get back to you if you can leave your contact information, but the idea is not to allow traffic directly to load balancer.
Right.
And so the channel is, the traffic is Web Application Firewall protects any configuration to the any traffic to the from flowing to the CloudFront or coming from to the CloudFront. But I will, on top of my head, I don't want to tell you, but there is another way you can also add.
Do you have something to add, Tyler, to what Sandy is?
Yeah, I can answer this for you. So essentially what you would do is you would, AWS has a set of IPs that they use for services, right? So even for CloudFront, what you would do is you would configure the whitelist on top of the load balancer to be the CloudFront IPs essentially. And you can create a Lambda that will poll for those IPs and updates what's known as an index list that you can set as a security group rule on the load balancer. And that index list, it'll be updated accordingly based on the AWS region. So there's these different IPs for different services in different regions. I can send that over real quick. Let me pull that list and I'll shoot it to you.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. But also,
I was going to jump in here, Sandeep, and I was going to ask David if there was a reason why you were thinking about doing WAF between CloudFront and the load balancer.
I don't know. That's what I was asking if we should.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Because we have that, because obviously with the load balancer, it's still, it is on the web, so the CloudFront is connecting to it, so it's still exposed. While we may not be directing deliberately,
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Somebody else could find it.
Yeah,
I see. Right. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
but as far as, I mean, I cannot confirm you immediately, but if you have configured associated CloudFront as a service here, you can also add load balancer as well because it's public facing, so you can protect both.
Right, but do we really want to have a full blown WAF with a bunch of rules in front of a load balancer? Because it feels like you'd want to essentially duplicate what's on the CloudFront. It seems like they're probably, I think it was Tyler, maybe on the right track with whitelisting it to the CloudFront IPs. That would limit the traffic so that we'd automatically reject anything that wasn't coming from CloudFront.
yeah, and you wouldn't have to use a WAF there. You would just simply use a security group role in the ALB to provision.
Yeah, that seems like probably a good step to try that.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So basically, you only allow traffic from CloudFront to your ALB.
Great. Okay. Yeah, and I'm familiar with the IP list. I hadn't thought about polling it, but yeah, something we definitely set up.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. Any other question?
I was going to throw out one little quick advantage also for WAF. AWS has in the past, when there have been recently the two kind of open source Java library that had the security instances, the RCEs. So the Log4j and the Spring RCE that came out, this spring, AWS released updated rule sets into into WAF in order to protect you against those vulnerabilities. So that was kind of like a handy thing that allowed you to just implement these. If you're already running WAF, you could just implement these, or you could just use these rule sets. So that was kind of a handy little feature. So I expect that in the future, that'll be a typical response from AWS to release those rules as those kind of vulnerabilities are exposed. So really super, I mean those vulnerabilities in those third-party open source libraries. So that's just a really handy way to protect yourself if you're using those Java open source libraries. Really handy way to protect yourself really fast.
Yep. And I'm sure the rule sets are getting revised as
Yeah.
we
Yeah. Right. That's yeah.
And if you are used to any particular firewall, you can also subscribe from AWS Marketplace on WAF.
I'm
After
posting.
that, we have 5 minutes.
I'm posting the AWS IP ranges into the chat for y'all. That's where you pull them from. This is updated. It's just a JSON file that you just set up notifications to view and pull from. It has all different kind of services inside of here, but CloudFront's included. I've built solutions for many of these services. I actually have some modules that I could probably link for y'all to be able to do that, where you won't have to do any developing. You could just use a module and input some variables.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Anything else? Otherwise, we have 4 minutes. We can wait for 1 more minute for any other question.